Well, William, here we are, our first Friday night fight back. And look, what I thought it would be good to talk about, I mean, I think that plenty of people have got a yearning for a freer and a happier society. And when I think about that, when I look at it, I think people have this memory of a higher trust society. And it's that sort of memory resurfacing at a time where we're suffering the miseries and privations of what's essentially become a low trust society. A society stripped of much of its trust and instead with loads of responsibilities devolved to a state that does it very badly. So I think we need to work out as a party and as a country how we get to rebuild a high trust society. Any ideas?
There's lots of ideas. There's lots of things you could do, but I totally agree with you. I think everyone wants to live in a high trust society. Everyone wants to live in a stable community. And there is this sense that we've lost something. And you'd only have to speak to your parents or your grandparents to see that. A lot of writers talk about things like the loss of the common life, don't they? And we all feel it in a sense. And we ought to... The problem I have is that sometimes it's easier to want something than to be able to sort of create the conditions for it reappearing, isn't it?
Oh, I think that's totally right. But I mean, I think the first thing or one of the things that might be useful is just to remind ourselves how far down this road of low trust society we've gone and the authoritarianism which has kind of come in its wake. I mean, it's kind of, you don't have to listen to your grandparents to think about a time where if someone was going to open your letters, you feel that was crackpot crazy. But now, of course, all your emails are being scanned, all your messages are being scanned. I mean, you wouldn't have expected even 10 years ago for the government to routinely spy on, where you go in your car. And now they plan to use it to fine you for going where you shouldn't go. I mean, that's extraordinary stuff.
Yeah, some of that's led by the technology enabling it, isn't it? I mean, there's a great quote, an A.J.B. Taylor quote, I think, which is that a man could be a person could be born, live and die, and scarcely come into contact with the state. And that was pre-1915.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't it be lovely?
Yeah, and you can't undo the technology. You can't uninvent things. But what you can do is try and create a slightly more stable situation, possibly by slowing some of the things down that have created massive change. Because I think change, Michael, is one of the things that's really caused this disorientation. People have had to deal with massive economic change, social change, demographic change, all at the same time. Yeah. And, in a lot of communities, particularly in cities, there's just a lot of churn.
Well, you've got to say, I mean, you've also got to say, and, no one likes to mention it, but if you have really mass immigration as well, it's absolutely inevitable that's going to lower trust. I mean, these are people you don't know. They have different habits, different ways of dress, maybe don't even speak the same language. I mean, clearly, with the best will in the world, if you have mass immigration, you've got to start working at nation building and nation rebuilding and making sure your society becomes more cohesive, not less.
Yes, it's quite a controversial subject. Funnily enough, I've just done an interview with Ed West, and the problem with it is that a lot of the social science data does say that, the more diverse societies, the more challenging it is on that. In those respects, it is, Putnam, who wrote the original book, charted this, and it's generally true. Having said that, there is a startling example of Singapore, which is quite diverse culturally, and they have very high trust in that there isn't any crime. I mean, pretty much.
But do you know, William, how they got that? I mean, this is the bit that everyone wants to forget. But my great hero, Goh Keng Swee, actually did it. At the time of the Malay emergency, there was obviously, there was a real problem about communist insurgency. There was a real worry that the nation might not survive. And what he did was he embraced the idea of vigilantism. And he actually enrolled, I think it was about 14,000 people, into basically public vigilantes in order to patrol for a while social what was happening on the streets. Now we are absolutely. I mean, you tell any BBC reporter that you're that you're imagining there might be something good about having vigilantism, and they will flee to the hills. But maybe there is, giving people a stake in their community to, okay, yeah, we're going to enforce various rules.
Yes,
does this make me a Nazi?
Well,
It might. It might.
You'd have to do it on a sort of commune basis, wouldn't you? It's like inside the commune, you'd have certain elders that would. That as a description, that certainly maps onto what family members. My eldest son lives in Singapore, and certainly there isn't any crime. If any crime occurs, the whole society knows about it and is right round. And in fact, the police are very effective, but the real police is the community itself.
Yeah. Well, as I say, they started that through, these vigilante groups being instructed by the police, led by the police, but basically, okay, it's your streets. Let's make sure they're clean and safe.
They also have, the Singaporeans also have a strong integration, non-ghettoization policy, which again, I sometimes tease politicians in this country and quiz them on Britain's policy for integration. It doesn't have one.
No.
It never had. It was completely absent. So one thing that you mentioned in your piece attached to this is just care of public realm, and it's something I feel very strongly about. And certainly as practiced by people like Councillor Wayne Dixon. This is, you can't always solve, social problems overnight. You can't, it's much more difficult to solve people's personal problems. But public policy can get public realm right if it wants to. You can make sure the place is looked after and kept well, and it's almost noticing it subliminally. If you walk into a new town or village and it is kept well, don't you?
Oh, totally. Yes. And that spreads out, which is why I think, I look at Wayne's Twitter account, and it's just full of kind of, look, there's rubbish here, there's graffiti there, get it cleaned up. And it must, I imagine that people will think, okay, someone actually really cares about this community, and look, the community is not as bad as it used to be. And maybe that begins to build pride, and therefore you might, if you're lucky, get a self-reinforcing improvement.
I think so. And the other thing that's vital is that if people lose faith or trust in a community, literally then investment, I'm not talking in a technical sense, but I'm talking about investment at the level of planting trees and believing there is a future, that just collapses. But the converse, if things are perceived to get better, and we know that neighbourhoods can improve if you roll your sleeves up and work at it, then the opposite happens, and people think, actually, it's getting better. I'm going to put my shoulder behind this. The funny thing in the pandemic, Michael, was that when the pandemic happened, as the small minor civic leader here of my commune of 4,000 people, I put together a village volunteer scheme to run errands, to help people during lockdowns, to get prescriptions, to do shopping and things. And I was inundated. Honestly, Michael, the appetite to roll up your sleeves and help was there. It just needed mobilizing. And the pandemic was the thing. Actually, in the end, we had far too many. Proves a point, though.
Totally. There is an appetite there for rebuilding, or for community, actually. And many times, but I guess the guys who need it most are the ones who've had it least, actually. So, similarly in North Yorkshire, there's plenty of community still there. It's very obvious. But I think, slightly rougher places, it gets more challenging, which is where I think, the party actually, as, with yourself and also, showing with what Wayne is doing, we can actually make a help. We can actually help even before the inevitable assumption of power that is coming our way.
Well, you can do it. I think you can do it anywhere, Michael. I think you can any situation. Doesn't matter whether it's the toughest neighbourhood or the easiest. You can do it. You can always make an improvement. And I think in the long run, what we want is the sort of society actually that Lee Kuan Yew described in the famous account of when he gets out of, I think it was the late 40s, wasn't he? Gets out of Piccadilly tube station, and the paper seller selling the Evening Standard, whatever, is gone for a few minutes, and he's got a little tin there, and it says, "Please leave your change." And Lee Kuan Yew observed these Londoners putting their pounds in and taking their change, and everything was functioning fine, and it was all on trust. And he said, that's the sort of community society that you need.
And that wasn't available in Singapore then. It is now. It was available in the UK now. I don't think it's there at the moment.
Well, we'll build it.
Work to be done.